To our thinking, we don't always give it a lot of thought. The second week is entitled Sharpen the Mind and explores how if we wish to love God and love others, we must take responsibility for our thought life. The third week, Mental Toughness, tackles how we can be like Jesus and train our minds. And finally, we finish out the series with Love God with all your mind. We will unpack how we are called to love God with our whole mind and not check our brains at the door of religion or suspend our curiosity and our questions at the altar of faith. So that's a lot. Let's get started. All right, let's get started. So Megan, what do you think has your attention? Can you identify like one of those junk food items that has your attention in your daily life that maybe you wish it didn't?
So I would say something that has my attention a lot is my phone. Use my phone a lot for work. You know, you take phone calls. I check my email on my phone. I manage a couple sites on my phone. But then there's always that, I have my phone. And then, there's something on Amazon for sale. Or, the news. I mean, there's so much going on in the world right now that it's so easy to be like, I'm going to click on that little story and 4 hours later, who knows where I've gone. Exactly. And it's easy to lose track of time.
Yeah.
So I would say that's something that it has a lot of my attention. I feel like I need to have my phone because I have children and I feel like they need to get a hold of me or, and that world that we've created in this creature.
Sure.
But then all the little branches and vines that you can go down once you've bought into it.
There's that functionality of it that helps us do a lot of things in any place, but then also the piece that comes with it that it's a distraction or it can pull away because we can do so much in that one moment. Does anybody else resonate with anyone else?
Yeah, I think all of us. I came from where we didn't have phone years ago, and we never needed a phone until this phone came. And now it's like we need to have our phone always with us, like you were saying. And because of our kids, when my kids were little, we didn't have a phone, and we worry about them if they were not with me, close to me, but we didn't depend on the phone to communicate with them.
In other ways.
And so all of that is, you think about when you were growing up differently, and you say, well, I could have done it, I did it without the phone, why can't I do it now? But it is. I mean, even driving, you think you have to have it there, and we didn't have a phone before, and there were phone booths everywhere, but you didn't get off your car to make a phone call.
Right, I think it's funny, like my kids today that drive, I have two older ones that can drive, and they never have to remember where anything is, because they just put on, I know Boise and Nampa like the back of my hand, because I didn't have that way to navigate when I was younger. I just had to figure it out and problem solve, so it is different, for sure.
It is different. Yeah. We did memorize the numbers.
Yes.
We memorized the numbers, and now it's like we depend on the phone in order to get someone or call someone, because I don't remember. I only know one daughter's phone number for sure, and not even my daughter's phone number unless I look at her name, and then that's how I find it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So Marisela, maybe you kind of attention, we can springboard off of that. What do you think should have more of our attention? If this is an example of how it can be a useful tool, but also a tool that really sucks us in and takes us down that rabbit hole, what should have our attention, do you think?
For me, I think my attention should be concentrated a little more on praying. I struggle with leaving, getting up earlier and setting up a time to pray before I leave the house or before I get up and before I go and start doing all the things that I have planned to do, either get ready to come to work or do other things. And the praying early in the morning, I don't take that time. If someone sends me a message and says, please pray, then I take that time. And for that time, but I don't set a time to do praying.
Do you feel like when you were younger that you were able to do that more effectively, or has that always been a struggle?
I think yes, because the life was different and I did different things back then. Once I started adding more things to my schedule, that started fading away. And in order to, it's not that I don't want to, but in order for me to take that time, I would need to wake up earlier and already wake up early to work out in the morning. I could be working out and be praying, but for my brain, it's hard sometimes to do that.
Yeah.
I try to do that, but then my brain goes somewhere else, especially when it's work busy time.
Well, do you think that because we're so hyper-connected, like what you said, with our phones and things, that's enabled us to do so much more, and now we've packed more into our time, our daily schedule, and then it's now when we try to do things like should have our attention, like prayer or taking care of your body, your mind, and your soul, and balancing those things, that keeps getting pushed farther and farther because we've packed all this other stuff in? What do you think? Do you think there's a correlation between the two?
How can there not be a correlation?
She says yes.
Yes. And the other day she was saying something about the phone and praying. So our brain goes away when you're trying to even pray. I start praying and then my brain goes away, and then I need to bring myself, okay, don't worry about that. I'm praying at this moment. But I noticed that if I'm working out and I turn on my phone and I hit the YouTube, the rosary, it tends to bring me back because I'm listening to it as I'm praying it.
Nice. So you can use that as a tool to then help you instead of
be the health food and not the junk food.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, so smart, Marisela. So Kathy, what steps do you think we can take, or you could take intentionally, all of us could take, to give more attention to things like prayer, or that we think we should be having more focus on?
Well, I think if we're intentionally doing it, then I would hit that rosary app before I hit Facebook, or hit the, where our parish app.
Oh yeah, the
right.
St. Paul's app.
And before I would go and do something else, and just really making that conscious decision to not go the social media. And for me, that's where I have to be. I have to take a stand with myself and say, you need to do this and not that. But also I have to set an alarm for that.
I'm so with you on that. I set so many alarms because otherwise I'm like, ooh, squirrel, what's next? Yeah. For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Use form now that we are being asked to use it more.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, for sure. And find ways that work for you, those pieces that, because we all know each other or ourselves better than probably anybody else, right? So like if we know that if you listen to the rosary as you pray and that helps you focus, then keep tapping into that, right? Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. All right, so Kathy, can you share with us maybe an experience that you've had recently that has caused you some stress or even great distress, and how did you experience that? What was your understanding of that moment in time?
Well, so recently at my house, we had a large plumbing project happen to us. It was not something that we planned for, and it was very expensive.
Ouch.
And it took a lot of time. And those are that was one of those things that we knew that eventually that it needed to be taken care of. I just didn't know that it needed to be taken care of that day.
Sure.
And I think dealing with that, not knowing what's coming at me next and how much is it going to cost, am I going to be able to do this, do I have to take time off work, led to, super amount of stress. I didn't know what I was going to do next, and obviously I came to the office and I'm like, oh, girls, guess what? Which helped.
Nice.
But
so did you feel like that moment? I mean, I know when I'm stressed, if I'm not super careful, and even when I am, that impacts how I relate to the people around me.
Oh,
that,
goodness sakes, yes.
How did that express for you?
I think that in my house, we felt that from the top floor to the bottom floor, from my oldest child to my youngest child. I'm sure you guys probably had to deal with it on some level here at work. Yeah, it completely impacts every facet of your day and your life and your interactions.
Fair enough. You guys had stuff like that too? Do you feel the same way?
I do. I'm completely a projector. I guess something will happen, and then I just, for lack of a better word, attack. And my daughter, who's older, has gotten to where she'll be like, okay, so what's really wrong? But, that shows maturity, and for me not to just, I continue to attack her when she says that, but to stop and recognize. Or she'll say, what did my brothers do today?
Aww.
But yeah, because you do, and recognizing that, though, it's so easy.
Yeah, that's
the
huge.
sky is falling.
Yeah, I tend to do that too when something happens. I think project is a good word for that, because I just keep cycling through that problem in my brain, and I can't let it go until it's been resolved. And so it's a real struggle for me to set that aside. Mm-hmm. We talked about that earlier today, where how if I've got these things to do, I need to have a list and write it down and then tick it off and have it on a schedule and blah, 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 and that helps my brain quiet itself. But when it's a problem like that, how do we let that go?
And you can't control it.
No.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
No, the biggest stress reliever for that whole thing was getting a bid for the job. And the bid was super stressful.
Man.
Yeah, so
right.
I got a bid of $17,000 for this job, and I was relieved.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Now I know which way I'm going.
Yeah. At least you have the information in hand. So Maricela, I'm sure we've all had moments like that. So when you have a moment like that, how do you test your perspective of what's happening in that moment? Do you seek out insight from other people to reflect back at you what you're experiencing and give you insight? Can you give me an example of maybe that?
I try to call if it has to do with work and I'm not seeing in the correct way, that I know myself, that I'm not seeing it in the correct way, or I'm doubting.
Sorry to interrupt, but how do you know you're not seeing it in the right way? Why do you think that?
If I don't agree
Okay.
with what's going on,
Okay.
I try to ask somebody else, and I tell them, this is what's going on, and this is the way I feel.
Okay.
Please help me understand that I'm doing it wrong. But I want to know if I'm doing it wrong. That way I can correct that. And I try to do that in my house. That's the same way. If there is something going on with the girls or anything that is going on that I don't agree and I'm fighting, like this right here, that I want to know. Hey, tell me that I'm wrong, and then I will be happy to do it after I understand that I am wrong. And I stop arguing about it or discussing that. No, but why? Why does it have to be that way? Or why are the programs differently?
Sure. So let's say you seek out that perspective from someone else and say, okay, hey, Kathy, so I feel this way. I think this is dumb and this is why. And you're like, me too. You're like, yeah, that's awesome. Where do you go from there?
So I have had several occasions where I was really, really unhappy in what was going in my life. And I remember really well going home and crying because this was happening to me. And then I thought, you know what? No one else can help me better than God. So I remember standing in front of the cross that I had in my room, and I said, you're the only one. Help me see that this is okay, that this is going to be fine, and that I'm going to be okay doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm not lying. I was doing the bed, crying and talking to God and really mad at the situation. And I heard this little voice that in my ear said, "You're going to be fine. Just continue doing it. You're going to be fine. Everything is good for you."
Awesome. That's good.
And I said, okay, fine. I thought this is the moment where I need to say, I gave it to him, he answered, and I'm going to let it go.
That's beautiful. Because I think it's important for us to reflect on our experiences and invite God's perspective into that, which that's like huge, but it's hard for me to let go of my own perspective and listen to that response. So have you had experiences where you've invited God into that reflection and how do you do that, I guess? How do you invite God intentionally into that reflective moment when you know you've had a moment that's stressful and you get insight from other people and now you're like, now what? How do you do that, Megan?
I think it's a life thing. You learn how to do it over time. You know, I think it's happened all my life where after something's over, you'll see a little sign or, you know, something and be like, oh, okay. You know, and I'm learning to more in the moment take that time to pause and let God's will be done instead of what I want him to do, which doesn't always align with what is done.
I don't think God did what we, right?
I've had to with myself personally say, is this worth falling on my sword for?
Is this the mountain I want to die on?
Is this the mountain and you know, will this change the world? You know, or am I the only one having a problem with this? But also, you know, what does he think about what I'm doing?
Right, that's fair. Is it not only reflecting on, is this a salvation issue? I have a friend that used to always say that to me because I'd be like, and then this happened, and she's like, it's tough. Is this a salvation issue? No, but it is to me. She's like, that's the whole point. It's to you, and maybe not to the rest of the world, or even to God.
Right.
And how do we let that go, and how do we gain God's
perspective? It's a dust bunny in the story of life instead of this catastrophe.
For sure. So for me, I think, and you kind of alluded to it for week one, like taking that time to pray intentionally and if asking God into that moment every day, saying, okay, can you check back with me this day and what happened and tell me what you think. But it's setting those alarms to remember to do that. Yeah. But it does it's a lifelong practice.
It is. Yeah. And learning to see the signs.
Yeah.
I went the wrong way, but that was a really cool, field of flowers I saw, or, oh my gosh.
Do you have some tips on how to see the signs?
I think you just learn as you walk through life. I think the signs come to you differently too.
That's fair.
But yeah, because there'll be times you're like, oh yeah, or thank you, thank you, I needed that. Yeah,
that's fair. I think sometimes you see the signs because maybe you do take the time to stop and pray and reflect on your day too, and then you're like, oh, that's right there, right? Like those are, if we're taking the time to actually commune with God and ask God into that experience, then that's when we see those moments more clearly too. Opens our eyes. All right, so now we're going to tackle week 3 and mental toughness. So the springboard for this was the story of Jesus meeting with the Pharisees, and they're like, hey, Jesus, do we pay taxes to Caesar or not? What's the deal? And Jesus, being ever being Jesus, right? He just responded with this calm and intelligent and sharp response of, hey, give unto Caesar what's Caesar's and give unto God what's God. And that way he interrupted the whole trap that they tried to place for him. So we are called to kind of do the same thing, to be like Jesus. So Kathy, so we all have these battles, these experiences that require us to have mental toughness like Jesus had in that moment. So can you give us an example of an experience you had, and what were the triggers, the pitfalls that come with all of that?
So my mental toughness battle is my husband's been gone for a year, and so I deal with that on a daily basis. And the triggers can be anything from as small as nobody to help me make my bed to my plumbing issue. So,
Sure, yeah.
but we find a way around that stuff and, power through it and try and do it with a smile on our face and pray like crazy.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Megan, do you have, I mean, she's right, we all have these things that come up, and that's like a long, ongoing example of something. You have to have that stamina constantly, right? Because it's going to hit you at different places.
Right.
So do you have a plan that maybe you could share with us your wisdom for kind of implementing a training regimen to help us sharpen our mind to be a little, have that toughness? It doesn't mean we won't have those moments where we do want to cry on the bed and hit things, but in the most loving way. But to help us have that stamina, that clarity of thought that Jesus had, and being able to respond to situations like that.
I think the training regimen that I use is embracing the people around me.
Okay.
I have a tendency to want to be a loner.
Mm-hmm.
My mission church, I'm by myself with the ghost that's there. But I do a lot on my own. And through this whole world pandemic, I'm spending a lot more time here. And it's been good for my job, but it's been good for my soul too. It's, telling my husband I'll stay for lunch and I'll leave after lunch. I don't have to stay and work. But the training myself to reach out to people and recognizing when there's something going on that I need someone else. And it could just be that hi, and that's it. But that gets me through that moment.
Sure.
And then trying to recognize that in other people. That's hard too.
That's huge.
The guy that honked at me on the way over here. He needed a moment to just sit there and wait for the pedestrian. It was just that I was helping him. So
that's awesome. Do you feel like goals and revisiting that maybe a goal or vision that you have that you're trying to attain helps with that training of getting mentally tough? Like with a training regimen, I'm like, okay, I have this moment where the plumbing went crazy and I'm all by myself and my partner's however many thousands miles away or whatever. The goal of, hey, I'm going to get through this because this is a family goal of ours for him to do this and us to do this. Does that help you sharpen your mind and bring you back to center and give you the stamina to get through those moments?
I think anytime you can set a measurable goal and get there is that's the only way it works for me.
Sure.
It's huge.
Yeah.
I have to have somewhere to go, a point A to a point B.
And then practicing it.
Yes.
I think that's another piece that's huge, because we can say, yeah, that's my goal, but if neat, but no, if we don't put it into practice, like what you said, like choosing to recognize in other people that moment, or choosing to stay for a lunch, like, okay, I'm going to practice being more present, and because this is good for me, and training my brain to be mentally sharp and for my soul. Yeah. Yeah. Any other insight on that, on how to help us be like Jesus? Well, okay, Maricella's going to share us all. That's all her wisdom about how did Jesus do it, do you think? I mean, he was God.
He was God.
But he's human too.
And he was human, and I think he showed that in a lot of the verses in the Bible where he it seems like he had lost patience with people and his followers. But he also took the time to separate from everyone, to pray, and to talk to God at the same time.
For sure. Yeah, that's true. He did. He set clear boundaries, didn't he?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we forget about that. But he set clear boundaries. He took those 40 days, and then he also then during his active ministry took time to say, I'm going to go over here and pray.
Yes.
And then he took intentional time to work with the people that he needed to work with. Yeah, that's true. Any other insight about Jesus? Because he was definitely irritated sometimes, tossing tables over and stuff. I'm like, woo, Jesus, let you know. Sometimes I wish I could toss some tables, but I don't think that's okay.
Yes.
Any other insight about that? No.
Not for me.
No. All right, well then that's that. Okay, starting again, because I was going to say Kathy. Megan. Okay, we're going to do that again. 5, 4. So Megan, can you tell me, we all have different experiences with God and how we came to know God. Can you share with us a little bit about where you learned about God from? That was poorly phrased, but
it's okay.
Yeah.
No, and I give this as part of my testimony when I talk to my confirmation kids. My parents sent me to school there at St. Paul's.
Okay.
And I, came to school from the kindergarten up to 6th grade. And I was baptized when I received communion, which, you look back on pictures and I remember being baptized. So we talk about, babies and where your faith is from. But I didn't realize till I was older, when I was talking about it to my parents, they said, well, we just sent you to St. Paul's because we knew it was a good school. We weren't Catholic at the time.
Oh, interesting.
But they followed me in my path, and because I chose to follow the teachings and learn about the church and stuff through the school, I guess they were all baptized and brought into the church at the same time. So I thought that was a really neat experience. So we talk about you cradle Catholic and later in life, and I always considered myself that, but I guess I chose the path for my family, and it's in my heart, and then I've just continued on with that ministry. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Any other people want to share? Because I definitely was a cradle Catholic for sure, but my grandparents really. My mother's parents were from Germany, were in Germany. That's where my mom was from, and even though we didn't, I spoke a little bit of German and I couldn't really understand and have in-depth conversations, I could see their faith life when we visited. And even though my mother raised us Catholic, and I went to church and did that stuff, and my mom was always good at explaining why we do what we do, but it was that witness from my grandparents that I saw maybe once every 5 or 6 years that really was the push to know more, not only here in my heart, but in my head. It was, I want that. That's what I want. You know what I mean? So, Kathy, are there certain things that you've done to actively seek out God's Word? How do you know more about God? How do you learn about God?
Well, I have kind of the opposite story that Megan has. My mom went to Catholic school and did all the way through high school. We were born and raised Catholic. I went to church every Sunday, and that's really the extent of it. Everything that I learned through Mass, and obviously what I pick up here in the office too. There's a lot of great discussions that happen in the office, and I always go home and I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that was, So I wouldn't say that I've really been an active participant in seeking, but I am a sponge and I pick up things around me, and I make sure I make it to Mass.
Sure, yeah. I'm a reader, so to me, I'm like, tell me more, and why is it that way? Give me more. I'm this first, and it informs my heart. Usually not the other way around. I mean, I have those moments, but it's definitely, I need to seek out that knowledge, and that knowledge is what is the springboard for me to be in love with God, really, for me. And everybody's slightly different. Do you have any experience like that, Maricela?
No, I failed to do a lot of reading. Is this?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
We'll go there.
I do fail to do a lot of reading. I try to read the Magnificat. I don't try. I read the Magnificat every night. And I really like it and enjoy it. It gives you the daily readings. It also gives you a saint for the day, and it gives you the information on that saint. So I've learned about saints in that way.
Cool.
And then also it gives you a reflection. And the reflections, a lot of the times, it makes you think of events in your life, and you think, oh, it brings you, it's like throwing me a rock on my head saying, oh, this is for you. You need to pay attention to this and try to do things a little different from the way I live my life.
do you do any kind of like, so she does the Magnificat, are there certain things that you try to do that help you learn more about God, or is it?
I've tried to really learn and listen to the gospel readings on Sunday, and to see how it ties with the first two.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, it's been a recent thing that I enjoy doing, and then hearing the story and the background behind it, and then applying it to life and getting that aha moment. But there are those Sundays where you're just like, thinking about dinner and wanting to cook. But then there's those Sundays where you're like, are you looking in my head?
Is Father
talking to me?
Yeah.
What did I write down on my desk? So I think that, I think it's that way with, even if you pick up the book and you read it and it's not your story today, it might be your story tomorrow.
Right. And we all have different styles of learning
Yes.
and experiencing God.
Yeah.
So that's huge. That's awesome. Thank you. We'll wrap it up.
Thank you.